You know, the way we tell our history, it's not some dusty old book on a shelf. It's something we're constantly wrestling with. It's an active process of figuring out who we are. And it really comes down to the stories we choose to tell, and maybe even more importantly, the ones we decide to skip over. So let's dive into what that really looks like. Okay, so check out this quote from the poet Mourid Barghouti. It just hits the nail on the head for what we're talking about today. For so long, the story of America has kind of started from secondly, right? We jump right to the founding fathers, the ideals of liberty, and the whole brutal reality of slavery gets treated like this footnote. But what happens if we flip that? What if we actually decide to start the story with firstly?
All right, so to kick off this journey of starting with firstly, we're going to follow a question. It's a really simple but incredibly powerful question that just cuts through all the noise, all the complicated stories we've been told for centuries.
So this question actually came from a student, a guy named Josiah, who was studying the civil rights movement. He just asked, how did this all start? And man, what a question. It's the kind of question that makes you have to unlearn the history you thought you knew, the one that always starts with secondly, and instead go searching for a much more honest place to begin. Okay, so our journey's going to start at a place that is just so central to the American story. We're going to Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home. And this place, it's a perfect example of this clash we're talking about. It's where some of the nation's highest ideals were put on paper, but it's also where those ideals came crashing right into a really brutal reality.
And listen to this. This is what a tourist said after taking a tour there. A tour that didn't pull any punches about what Monticello really was. It's that moment, right? That gut punch realization when you're faced with a history that is way more complete and honestly way more complicated than the one you probably got in a textbook.
And this is where that conflict just becomes impossible to ignore. On the one hand, you've got Jefferson's words in the Declaration of Independence, all about equality. But then you look at his other writings, like his notes on the state of Virginia, and he's literally theorizing about why Black people are inferior, basically trying to justify the very system that propped up his entire life. The thing is, you just can't understand one of those things without looking at the other. So, from the home of one of the founders, we're going to head to a place that just completely flips the script. We're going to the Whitney Plantation in Louisiana. And the difference here is huge. It changes the main question from, what did the people who owned this plantation do, to, who were the people who were enslaved here?
Yeah. And this quote from the director of operations there, it just perfectly explains what they're doing. The whole mission of the Whitney Plantation isn't just to show you what bondage was like. It's about restoring the humanity of the people who went through it. It's about talking about them as people, their strength, their families, what they left behind. It's about seeing them as people so we can see each other as people.
So that's really the key here, right? It's all about this massive shift in perspective. By putting the names, the faces, the actual stories of enslaved people front and center, the Whitney forces you, it forces all of us, to start the story with them, to start with firstly. Okay, so we've been to a museum that's all about reckoning with the past. But now we're going to a place where that past isn't really past at all. It is, shockingly, literally, present. We're going to Angola prison. And just let this sink in for a second. This is the largest maximum security prison in the entire country. The vast majority of the men locked up here are Black, many serving life sentences. And it's built on the very same land that used to be a massive 18,000-acre plantation. The writer Clint Smith, when he visited, put it perfectly. He said this isn't some kind of symbol. It's not a metaphor. It's literal. You have Black men working in the exact same fields where enslaved people were forced to work, generation after generation. I mean, that connection, it's just so direct, you can't look away from it. And if that wasn't enough, then you get this layer of just complete absurdity. The prison has a museum, and that museum has a gift shop. And in that gift shop, you can buy souvenirs, like coffee mugs with a slogan that calls this place, this prison built on a former plantation, a gated community. I mean, the disconnect is just staggering. It's a total failure to even acknowledge the history of the ground you're standing on. All right, so our journey is going to take us now right into the heart of the battle over American memory. We're going to Blandford Cemetery in Virginia. It's a memorial for Confederate soldiers. And this place, this is where history and myth just go head to head. Now, to really get what's going on here, you have to understand this thing called the lost cause. It's basically a whole ideology, a story that tries to reframe the Confederacy's fight as something noble, something heroic, all while intentionally wiping away the fact that it was all about preserving slavery. And this is the story you'll hear at a place like Blandford. It's a story of heroism, of sacrifice. It's a narrative where Confederate soldiers are seen as patriots who were defending freedom. And we have to understand, for a lot of people, this is a really powerful and deeply held story. But then you have this immediate counter-narrative coming from someone who was right there when it was all starting. This is Frederick Douglass, back in 1870, watching this lost cause myth get built, and he's calling it out. He calls it nauseating flattery. When you put these two ideas right next to each other, you can see this as a battle over memory that's been going on for more than 150 years. So, after seeing all these places, all these conflicting memories, what are we supposed to do with all of this? How do we even begin to move forward? Well, the key really is to have a way to think critically about the stories we've been handed down. And this is such a crucial idea to grasp. For so many people, history isn't about, facts and dates in a book. It's an heirloom. It's a story that's been passed down from their parents and grandparents that tells them who they are, where they come from. And so when you challenge that story, you're not just challenging facts, you're challenging their very identity. And that's why this is all so difficult and so incredibly personal. So what's a practical way to move forward? Well, here's a really simple but powerful tool for engaging with difficult history. Instead of just taking a story at face value, we can just pause and ask ourselves 4 questions. First, what am I noticing? Second, what am I wondering about? Third, what am I feeling right now? And finally, based on all that, what am I beginning to think now? Because in the end, every single one of us is shaped by the stories we've been told. So I guess the real question for all of us is, are we willing to look closer at those stories and ask where they really began? Are we brave enough to try starting with, firstly, even if it means turning our world upside down?